Thank you, Cindy, and thank you, Associated Builders and Contractors. First of all, Kate, can we do that card thing again? That 5 to a king is not good at all. I'd like another shot at that if I could, please. Listen, with the crowd that we've got here in terms of legislative and local folks and members of the Supreme Court, one of the folks at the table said, well, who's running the state right now? Well, the rumor was the Secretary of State was yesterday because everybody was out of the state. So I guess everybody's down here today at the East Side candidate. Thank you for a great venue and a wonderful atmosphere to get together for the first time in what will be many in the coming month. The Treasurer and I have got some appointments with some of the Murderers Row people over here in the coming month, as well as some that aren't here. But I look forward to that. Leading up to the start of early voting the last Saturday of this month, and also Election Day on September 13th was a historic time for Nevada. You know, there's quite a bit of agreement on some of what's going on here right now, and that is we meet today under circumstances that are pretty unique, not only in Nevada, but in the nation. And most people agree that the issue is fix the economy here in Nevada, fix the economy in the nation. And as part of that fix, the primary interest is do something about unemployment. But I'm one of those folks who thinks that when you start talking about what the issue is and the challenges that meet this industry in this time, or this state, or this nation, that you have to first take a look at how you got here. But since most people's memories aren't too long, you don't have to go back for a long history lesson. And with what we've been treated to in the last month, in terms of the goings-on the East Coast, and talking about budget deficits and debts and who you're going to hurt and who you're going to help and who wins or who loses, all that stuff that becomes largely forgotten relatively quickly, I think it's important to focus on a couple facts. And it comes generally under the category of, let's try starting when we figure out how to get out of this by having a pretty good idea of how we got here. And when you talk about how we got here as a nation, because this is a race for a house in the United States, for a seat in the United States Congress, to finish out the 14, 15 months of Dean Heller's term that's remaining. And so you take a look at it, and you can't help but focus on the budget. And when you look at a budget that is over $1.5 trillion upside down for this year, and you look at one that was as much upside down in the preceding few years, and you look at the impact that's had on that thing they call the debt, and when that number of the debt starts to reach an equivalent amount of the gross domestic product, what you produce and I produce, what we produce in a year, then you start talking about those ratings agencies, you know, the ones that did such a good job in 2008, foreseeing what was happening, and you roll all that together and you come to the conclusion of this. You cannot continue to borrow 40 cents of every dollar that you spend and expect your economy to be healthy. And why is that important to the people in this room? Because an economy that isn't healthy is a killer for business. So let's talk about the facts. You cannot continue to borrow 40 cents of every dollar and expect your economy to be healthy. You cannot incur a credit card bill, a debt, whatever you want to call it, that equals the gross domestic product and expect your economy to be healthy. You cannot, and this is an important part because very little of this has been reported, you cannot grow your budget by the 30 to 40% that you are upside down now in the past 5 years, and then start a discussion on balancing it by, we can't afford to spend anything and this is awful. You must live within your means. Here in Nevada, as a member of the legislature for 14 years, every time I left Carson City at the end of a legislative session, well, sometimes it was at the end of a special session, and sometimes it was after somebody had sued us in the Supreme Court, but every time we left, the budget was balanced. That should not be a tremendously controversial thought when you talk about what's happened in the last 5 years. And why is that important? Because with all due respect, ladies and gentlemen, when you hear plans that talk about the next 10 years, what the federal government's going to do with their budget, remember the budget impacts the economy when it's out of control. When you hear about 10-year plans in the United States Congress, with all due respect, If they're saying they're going to do it in 10 years, I'm thinking that that has a credibility factor of something that's in single digits, very low. You better be talking about the next 5 years. And you better be asking yourself how the budget got to the level that it got to now and what we can do to get it back under control. Because, as the people in this room know, you don't spend your way out of a recession or depression by growing government at the same time. And you know how you know that most recently? Because we've been trying it for the last 4 or 5 years, and we sit here today with the same issues and the same problems that we started with. And so when you talk about, well, what are you going to do if you are allowed to go fill out the last 16 months of that term? What are you going to do for Nevada? What are you going to do for the federal government in terms of these issues? Absolutely fair question. Here it is. Here in Nevada, as you know directly, in Clark County, when you talk about economic development, and there was much talk about economic development in the last session of the legislature, changes made. Well, guess what? When you talk about economic development in the state where about 85% of the land is owned by the federal government, you need to have the landowner as a full participant. You need to have the landowner involved in those discussions. So when you talk about Nevada, example recently for here is when we were hooking up 24,000 houses a year here in Clark County when things were growing, and you had the Southern Nevada Public Management Land Act that was creating parcels for sale to developers, whether it's commercial or residential, the federal government was fully participatory. Now, you don't need that land right now with the way the market is, but you do need the federal government and its primary land management agency, the Bureau of Land Management, the land use folks for the state of Nevada. You need those folks involved in timely permitting processes, whether that's for energy exploration, whether that's for agribusiness, whether that's for infill parcels within Clark County and the other urban areas, and whether it's for minerals exploration. Or how about just recreation access? All of those things are a part of getting this economy and our economy getting ready to go back forward into a sustainable growth period. But you know what? You can't do that when the argument is, how do we raise taxes because we're borrowing 40 cents of every dollar in a recession where Nevada leads the state in some awful things?